Look at this. This is what years of neglect, moisture, and oxygen do to metal. This wrench has been sitting in a garage since 2003. 20 years of rust, 20 years of corrosion eating straight through the iron. Most people would throw this away. Most people would walk into a hardware store, spend $15, $20, even $30 on a branded rust remover, spray it on, and hope for the best. But here's what the big chemical companies do not want you to know. The science behind every single one of those expensive rust removers, the same science inside those fancy branded bottles, can be replicated for literally $1. $1. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that chemical is, exactly why it works, and exactly how to use it to bring rusted metal back from the dead. Stay with me, because the before and after you're about to see is going to completely change how you think about rust removal forever. That transformation right there, $1. No mechanic needed, no expensive products. Let's get into it. The dirty little secret of the rust removal industry is this. Most of those products you're paying a premium for work through one of two chemical mechanisms. Either they use a strong acid to dissolve iron oxide, which is the chemical name for rust, or they use something called a chelating agent, a molecule that bonds to iron ions and pulls them away from the metal surface. That's it. That's the whole secret. Acids or chelators. And when you understand that, you realize something very important. Nature and chemistry don't care about brand names. Phosphoric acid, citric acid, oxalic acid, these are the active ingredients, hiding behind fancy labels and expensive marketing. You're paying for the bottle, the label, the TV ad, and the shelf space, not the chemistry. So what if I told you there's a common household chemical, something you can buy at any supermarket, dollar store, or cleaning supply shop for around $1, that contains one of these exact acids in a concentration high enough to do serious rust removal work? That chemical is citric acid powder, and we're going to use it today to restore this completely rusted metal. Now, before we go further, let me put on my professor hat for a moment, because understanding why this works is going to make you a smarter DIYer for life. Rust, scientifically known as iron oxide, chemical formula Fe2O3, forms when iron reacts with oxygen and moisture. It's an electrochemical process. Over time, this reaction converts the surface iron of your metal into a reddish-brown, flaky, brittle compound that has no structural strength whatsoever. The longer it sits, the deeper it penetrates. Now here's where citric acid comes in. Citric acid is a weak organic acid, the same acid found in lemons and oranges. When you dissolve it in water and submerge your rusted metal, something beautiful happens at the molecular level. Now, the hydrogen ions in the acid react with the iron oxide. They convert that hard, crusty rust, the Fe2O3, into soluble iron salts. Iron salts that literally dissolve into the water and release from the surface of your metal. You'll often see the water turn orange or brown as this happens. That orange color? That is the rust. It's leaving the metal and entering the solution. The metal surface is being liberated, one molecule at a time. Additionally, citric acid has mild chelating properties, meaning it bonds to free iron ions and keeps them suspended in solution rather than redepositing on your metal. This is critical because if those iron ions floated back and reoxidized on your surface, you get flash rust within minutes of pulling the metal out. Citric acid helps prevent that, though we'll still need a neutralizing and drying step at the end, which I'll cover in detail. The bottom line is this. Citric acid works on rust through proven, legitimate acid chemistry. The same fundamental mechanism used by products costing 10 times as much. All right, let me show you exactly what you need for this job. First, citric acid powder. I picked this up at a dollar store for $1. You can also find it in the baking section of most supermarkets under names like sour salt. It's used in food preservation, home cleaning, and yes, rust removal. Second, warm water. Warm water dramatically speeds up the chemical reaction compared to cold water. Third, a plastic container or bucket large enough to fully submerge your metal pieces. Do not use metal containers. The acid will interact with them. Plastic only. Fourth, a stiff bristle brush or old toothbrush. Fifth, baking soda. This is for neutralizing the acid after treatment. Sixth, clean rags or paper towels for drying. Seventh, and this is non-negotiable, gloves, safety glasses, and good ventilation. Citric acid is a relatively mild acid compared to industrial rust removers, but it can still irritate skin and eyes with prolonged contact. Always protect yourself. Treat this with the same respect you'd give any chemical in your workshop. That's the entire shopping list. Most of this you probably already have at home. The only thing you might need to buy is the citric acid powder, and that costs $1. Now let's talk prep, because how you prep your metal before treatment makes a significant difference in your results. Look at that surface texture. You can see layers of rust here. The deep reddish-brown oxidation, some surface scaling, and in the crevices, thick buildup. Before submerging anything in the acid bath, I want to knock off as much of the loose, flaking rust as I can. This isn't mandatory, but it gives the citric acid direct access to the more stubborn, bonded rust faster. Don't go crazy here. You're just removing the surface debris. You're not trying to remove all the rust manually because that's literally what the acid is going to do for you. If you have multiple small pieces, bolts, nuts, small tools, group them together. They can all go in the same bath simultaneously. For larger pieces, like a big wrench or a section of chain, make sure your container is big enough so the piece will be fully submerged. Partial submersion means partial results. You want the entire metal surface in contact with the solution. Now let's mix the solution. I'm using warm water here. Not boiling, but noticeably warm to the touch. Think of it like a warm bath. Warm water increases the speed of the acid's chemical reaction, so you'll see results faster. For a standard soak, I'm using approximately 2 to 3 tablespoons of citric acid powder per liter of water. Stir until the powder is completely dissolved. You'll notice the water stays clear. Citric acid solution is colorless. The color change comes later when the rust starts dissolving into the bath. Now submerge your rusted metal completely. Make sure every surface, every crevice is covered by the solution. For lighter surface rust, you may start seeing results in as little as 30 to 60 minutes. For moderate rust, the kind we have on this wrench, expect 1 to 2 hours. For heavy, thick, deep rust that's been building for years, you might want to leave pieces in overnight, 8 to 12 hours. This is not an instant magic spray situation. This is chemistry, working systematically to break apart and dissolve iron oxide at the molecular level. And that takes time. Patience is part of the process. While we wait, I want to address something I see in the comments constantly. People ask, can I make this stronger by adding more citric acid? Yes, within reason. A stronger concentration means more acid molecules available to react with the rust, which can speed up the process. But don't go overboard. Extremely high concentrations can start to attack the base metal itself, especially on softer metals like aluminum or on chrome-plated surfaces. For standard steel and iron, tools, bolts, hardware, the 2 to 3 tablespoon per liter ratio is your sweet spot. If you're dealing with a delicate or plated surface, always test on a small, hidden area first. All right, look at that water. That orange color is the rust. The iron oxide that was locked onto your metal is now dissolved into the solution. That is exactly what we want to see. Let's pull the pieces out. Already, even before brushing, you can see the difference. The thick, flaking rust is gone. What you're seeing now is a much thinner residue, a grayish or dark surface layer, and in many areas, the clean metal is already visible. Now this is where the elbow grease comes in. Under running water, scrub the metal surface with your stiff brush. You're not fighting the rust anymore. The acid has already loosened and dissolved the chemical bond holding it to the metal. You're just mechanically removing the leftover residue. See how easily it's coming off? For bolts and nuts with thread detail, use an old toothbrush. Get into every crevice. The acid does the chemistry, the brush does the cleanup. For pieces with particularly stubborn spots, you can dip them back in the solution for another hour and repeat. There's no harm in multiple rounds of soaking. In fact, for heavily corroded pieces, 2 or 3 cycles of soak, scrub, soak will give you far better results than one very long single soak. Now this next step is absolutely critical, and it is the step most people skip. They pull the metal out, admire the clean surface, and move on. 2 hours later, there's a thin orange film of flash rust forming on their freshly cleaned metal. That happens because residual acid on the metal surface creates the conditions for rapid reoxidation. The solution is neutralization. Mix baking soda into a separate container of water. Baking soda is a base, sodium bicarbonate, and it will neutralize any remaining acid on the metal surface. Let the pieces sit in this solution for 5 to 10 minutes. You don't need to scrub here. You're just allowing the base to neutralize any residual acid in the pores and crevices of the metal surface. After the baking soda soak, rinse thoroughly under clean running water. Now dry immediately. Flash rust forms fastest when wet metal is left exposed to air. Use a clean rag to dry the entire surface. Then, if you have one, use a heat gun or even a hairdryer to ensure every crevice is completely dry. No rust, no residue. Clean, bright metal. Let me hold this up so you can see. On the left, what we started with, thick, flaking red-brown rust covering every surface. Surface texture completely destroyed by corrosion. Functionality compromised. Rust had gotten into the wrench mechanism. On the right, after 1 to 2 hours in a $1 citric acid bath. Clean steel. The original surface texture of the metal is visible again. The jaw mechanism moves freely. The stamped numbers and size markings are legible again. Look at these bolt threads. Before, you couldn't even see the thread definition through the rust. After, clean, fully defined threads that will actually engage properly. Every single piece from this batch came out clean. Total cost of the citric acid solution used, less than $1. Total time of active work, maybe 15 minutes of actual hands-on effort. The rest was just waiting while chemistry did the work. This is not magic. This is just knowing what chemicals to use and understanding the science behind them. Now that your metal is clean, let's talk about keeping it that way. Because removing rust is only half the battle. If you don't take steps to protect the clean metal surface, you'll be back doing this again in 6 months. Tip 1, oil it immediately. After drying, apply a thin coat of machine oil, WD-40, or even mineral oil to any metal that won't be painted. Oil creates a barrier between the bare metal and oxygen and moisture. This is especially important for tools and hardware that live in garages or workshops where humidity fluctuates. Tip 2, for anything structural or visible, apply a rust-inhibiting primer within an hour of cleaning. The longer bare steel is exposed to air after cleaning, the sooner surface oxidation begins. Primer seals the surface and prevents oxygen access. Tip 3, store tools in a low humidity environment. A silica gel packet in your toolbox costs nothing and absorbs ambient moisture that causes rust. Tip 4, for bolts and hardware going back into service, apply a small amount of anti-seize compound or copper-based grease. This protects threads, prevents future rust seizure, and makes the next removal job infinitely easier. Tip 5, if you're restoring metal that will be exposed to water or the elements, seriously consider a clear lacquer or rust-inhibiting paint coat after cleaning. The clean surface you've created is the perfect base for protective coating. Don't waste that clean foundation by skipping protection. Let me be honest with you for a moment about the limitations of this method because I want you to have realistic expectations. Citric acid works best on surface to moderate rust, the kind that hasn't fully compromised the structural integrity of the metal. If you have a piece of metal so heavily corroded that it's crumbling, pitting, or has visible holes, no chemical in the world is going to restore the metal itself. Rust removal chemicals remove oxidation. They cannot replace missing material. For extremely deep pitting, this method will still clean out the rust from those pits, but the pits themselves will remain. Also, be careful with certain metals and finishes. Do not use this method on aluminum without testing first. Citric acid can cause surface etching on aluminum at higher concentrations. Do not use it on chrome-plated surfaces without diluting significantly and reducing soak time dramatically. Chrome plating is extremely thin, and acid can penetrate through it to the base metal, causing bubbling or flaking. For standard steel, cast iron, and iron hardware, you're completely fine at the concentrations we've discussed. That's where this method absolutely shines. Where can you buy citric acid powder? Everywhere. Dollar stores, $1.50 sections of supermarkets, baking supply aisles, homebrew stores, cleaning supply sections, and of course, online. Search for citric acid powder or food-grade citric acid. The food-grade version is identical in function to industrial versions for rust removal purposes, and it's usually the cheapest form available. In bulk, you can buy several pounds of citric acid for just a few dollars. One bag will last you years of rust removal projects. Compare that to a single bottle of branded rust remover for $15 to $20 that might treat just a few pieces. The math is not complicated. The chemistry is not complicated. This is purely a knowledge gap, and now you have that knowledge. So there it is. A complete rust removal system for literally $1. No mechanic needed, no expensive products, no magic sprays. Just chemistry, patience, and the knowledge of what actually works. If you have a drawer full of rusted tools, a box of seized bolts, old hardware that's been written off, give this method a try before you throw anything away. You will be genuinely shocked at what comes back to life. Now here's what I want from you in the comments below. Tell me, what do you have sitting around that needs restoring? Old tools, rusted garden equipment, vintage hardware, seized bolts and nuts? Let me know what you want to see restored next, and if enough of you ask for it, I'll film the entire restoration and show you every step. If this video gave you value today, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need this information. Subscribe if you want more budget chemistry hacks and restoration projects, and share this with someone who has a rusty old toolbox sitting in their garage. You might just save them $20 in a trip to the hardware store. Until next time, keep restoring, keep saving money, and remember, chemistry is always cheaper than the store. See you in the next one.